This week on Maker Update, Donald and Tyler look back on their favorite Maker projects and tips from 2022.
Hey everybody, I'm Donald Bell.
And I'm Tyler Weingartner.
And we're here at the end of 2022 doing our informal year-end wrap-up show where we're going to talk about Tyler and I's kind of favorite standout projects of the year, go over a few of the tips that we think were kind of notable for the year, and let you start your 2023. Does that sound like a good idea, Tyler?
That sounds great to me.
All right. And again, I'll say just to couch the whole thing, that these are not by any stretch like the best projects of the year or some awards kind of thing. These are just the ones that Tyler and I personally picked out and thought, you know, this was a project that stuck in my mind, looking back as like, wow, that was really something I was interested in. So these are more reflective of our personal taste than there are some, you know, award for the most amazing maker project of the year. I think the first one being the Zenbot here by David Covarrubias. And this was a project that appeals to me on a lot of different levels. One, it's musical. It's a hand pan, or what they call like a tongue drum instrument. You've probably seen them before. It's meant to be just kind of played in your lap. Bum, 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 bum. It makes these beautiful kind of bell tones. He adapted one of those to a ring of servos that all have mallets on them, and you can sequence them so that they'll play a song. And I've participated in the Maker Music Festivals. I've been a fan of music and electroacoustic, electromechanical projects for music before, but this one is so well done. He includes all the STL files, code. The bill of materials is really great. It introduced me to the that particular kind of servo. I forget what it's called, like a Nixel Pixel servo.
It was something that was like hyper fast and accurate and quiet, if I remember.
Yeah, it was, and I remember also expensive. Although I looked it up before the show, and I think the prices have come down. The Dynamixel servos, they're around like $25 a servo, which still is not cheap. But I've recently bought a lot of servos for other projects and realized that that's not bad for a high end, or not a high end, but like a usable, nice project servo.
Yeah, I mean that price isn't too bad if you only need one or two for your project. Unfortunately, right. This one does need quite a few more than one or two.
Yeah, you've got what, 7 here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, but you can also dial it back for whatever your needs are. Anyways, I just thought it was a beautiful project. It makes a wonderful sound. It's not scrappy and low budget, but it's not over the top. And you really seem to have all the ingredients here to recreate the project. It was a make project, so that you kind of have over the top documentation on the whole thing. And also this guy David did a whole series of shorter videos breaking down the project, the assembly, the code, the CAD, all of it. So it's also just chef's kiss kind of documentation around a project. You throw in the fact that it's musical. It's one of those kind of elements that if you had it in your house, it would be the star of the show. Like no one else is going to have this kind of thing. I don't know. It just appeals to so many interests of mine. All right, we should move on though. What's the other project is also a make project.
It is also a make project. It's also a project that hits a lot of my interest points across the things that interest me, which is this project called Freaky Fractals, which is this it's this tool used to be able to create animated fractals that are captured within the camera. And this is done using, you know, if you've ever had a camcorder and you plugged it into your TV, one of the first things you end up doing is seeing what happens when you plug the camcorder at the television. So you get this video feedback of like a repeating image over and over again. So this is a tool that that was created by David Blair, and it uses a pair of monitors that are combined using like a 45-degree pane of glass, sort of like a Pepper's Ghost or a teleprompter, and that feeds into a camera that's on a rotating slider. And by rotating slider, what I really mean is like a dowel, a big, thick, like closet rod dowel that's, in a sleeve. So it's very manual controlled. I mean, the whole thing is like a wooden frame that, if you didn't know what you're looking at, it almost looks like an old weaver's loom. And with the combination of these things, he's able to start video on one of the monitors. I think the other monitor is feedback from the camera that's being fed back into the camera to create a feedback loop. And then he's able to adjust color and tone and shift the camera around. And he's able to create, use that video feedback to create these really gorgeous fractal patterns. And he's also able to do, like, if he uses an image on one, he can use it to create cool feedback loops that again shift in color, and the image shifts around, and it's just this combination of using camera tools and analog feedback methods to create really gorgeous visuals.
You can't argue with the results, right? It seems like a crazy kind of contraption to come up with, and you wouldn't imagine that what comes out of it is anything that could be held up to, a digital only tool, but it's stunning. And I'm sure there's got to be some post-processing that happens too, but the images he's able to create with this just look so liquid. I don't know how to describe it, but I mean, I'm sure we'll be covering this with B-roll of the whole thing too, but it's gorgeous. And I think what I love about this project is someone who's not comfortable with coding or like diving into, like, he clearly must come from the world of analog equipment and cameras and technology. And there's even like shots of him like having early versions of this machine, years and years and years ago. And it's been an obsession of his that he just developed over and over. And so it's this interesting growth out of what he's comfortable with, which was more like mechanical equipment and analog technology, to create these images that you wouldn't imagine could come out of this contraption. But it just it's a kind of a testament to like the obsession and where it took him, and it's really cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, not to get overly romantic about this, but I mean, you mentioned you mentioned that there's digital tools that could do this, and there are, but the output that you get out of them, it lacks that certain something that you, in the process that you see Dave creating with this tool and with these images, you feel the presence of like his actual human hands creating this and influencing it. That's, I think, is one of those things that gets lost when you're using digital animation tools.
All right. I was haunted by this one. This is but also it was I don't think I could improve on the title of this, the Robot Laser Guided Poop Pickup System by Caleb Olsen. This was a real fun surprise, because not only is it a maker who was completely new to me, but also it was the first time I'd seen an AI or a machine learning project that both delighted me and seemed practical. Like I could actually imagine using this as a dog owner. He essentially created, you have to, if you haven't seen the video, it's really worth going through. It's the whole process. What he ended up with was a system that would use computer vision to track where his dog would poop in the backyard, and then log those positions into a computer that when Caleb would go out to pick up the poops later, he had a laser assisted, like a robot arm with a laser on it that would go around the yard and point out the locations of where the dog had pooped so that he could go through and clean up the yard. And even that, there was computer vision there was computer vision that would detect the dog going poop by the way the dog would kind of curl up into like the poop position. And so that's how the AI would determine where the dog had gone. And then the same AI would, or the computer vision would look at Caleb's position when he would pick up what his dog had left behind and use that information to erase the entry so that the laser could go on to point out the next location. It was like so brilliantly thought out, but also so silly. But you're just along for the ride because you want to see how he solves this problem in this way over-engineered way. I don't know. It's a great video, and it's also, like I said, it's I've been seeing a lot of proof of concept AI machine learning videos and projects up until now, and I still do, and they're great, and I'm interested in them. But this one just really had that perfect mix of novelty and practicality and storytelling. It was a great project.
So our next one is, well, we covered a lot of projects by Zack Freedman over the course of the year, and part of that's because he builds a lot of really fun and interesting projects. But my favorite out of all of them was the real life Subtitles hoodie that he built. And this was using a wearable Raspberry Pi that would then pick up his audio in a microphone and then immediately transcribe them into text. That would be then displayed on a screen that was sewn into the hoodie that he was wearing. He used a cloud-based service to be able to quickly process the audio into text. Mm-hmm. And again, it uses a lot of machine learning kind of tools in the back end too. And that almost seems like kind of a slam dunk of like, this is a pretty simple project. But then he got into the tricky bits of like, what is the correct display size and how to parse the audio in a way that it made subtitles that were easy to read. Because the tricky thing about software interpreting human speech is that it tends to try to derive context, but then realizes it made a mistake based on words you said later, and then goes back and corrects the interpretation it made a few seconds ago.
Right.
So making sure that it displays the text that he's saying long enough that people can read it, but also that it displays it fast enough that it's not distracting, so that he's not moving on to something else and the text is displaying something he said 10 seconds ago. It got into a lot of the tricky bits about real-time transcription, and I don't know, it was just a fun, neat project, and actually had a really good practical and functional result in the end.
Yeah. Also, fashion statement too. I love like the screen actually infused into your clothing. Yeah, that was a real cool project. And also Zack is one of these makers that I'm continue to watch. It's always something surprising and great coming from him. For my last project I wanted to share here, Charlyn Gonda came out with a few different projects this past year that I really liked. One was the wearable pendant, which looked beautiful and had some LEDs in it. But the one that really stole the show was this cube, her tiny glowy Wi-Fi message cube, made out of all Adafruit components. Not only did I really like the end result, the payoff of this whole thing, but I also identified with how she was inspired to create it. And she talks about how in 2019, she saw all these great examples of these super dense LED shapes that had been shown to her at SuperCon, and how she was motivated and really inspired to chase after that idea even years later, to create some version of it. Now, the version she ended up with, the pixel density isn't quite as same as these super hand soldered LED cubes and everything, but the concept's there, and everything she learned along the way, she takes you through it through programming the ESP32 to have like an interface that you can draw on and type in, and all the failures of the 3D printing, enclosure. that she had to kind of fix and address. I just really enjoyed her process and her journey and the way she described this project. Plus, you get this guide, you get the Adafruit version of the guide. All the components are relatively easy to come by because I think they're all sourced from Adafruit or DigiKey. And so it's a relatively achievable project for someone who wants to take it on. But also just Charlyn's, whole write-up was really a joy to go through and see.
And so the last one that we have for our projects for 2022 is the Internet Time Machine by the Science Elf. And this was a project that makes use of the Raspberry Pi as a web proxy. And that's basically a piece of software that exists between your computer and the rest of the internet, where it takes your requests to the internet and interprets them into something else. And in this case, say you want to go to digikey.com, it would then interpret that and redirect you to the Internet Time Machine or the Wayback Machine's version of the DigiKey website. And if you're not familiar, that's a tool where you can explore the history of a website just by pulling up a calendar. So it's been capturing snapshots of websites since it knew about the website existing or since the Wayback Machine existed. Mm-hmm. It's just been capturing snapshots of those websites over time and stockpiling them. And so you can go and look at what DigiKey looked like in 2010 or 2000. And it also included this external tool with a dial on it so that you could just turn the dial and dial back the time of the website you're going to. So it's this fun little tool where you can just go and look at it turns the history of the internet into this fun little mechanical thing you can play with, and just more fun to explore than just the inherent interface of the Internet Time Machine or the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, it also introduces the idea of the internet having these historical layers to it, right? Where kids growing up just would imagine that the internet is the way it is and always has been, and that there's no looking back at the way it was, aside from maybe like a YouTube video that's captured it. But to be able to actually surf through the way a site was and think of the excavation that can happen on the internet that way is a cool mental shift. So that's projects. Now let's talk about some of the notable tips and tools that we remembered from this past year. And let's do this pretty rapid fire. Send, cut, send. What do you know about send, cut, send, Tyler?
So, I mean, I think we saw this with like PCB production services, because like making your own PCBs is a rough business, even if you're doing like two-sided stuff and you can't really get into more multi-layer than that at home. But being able to send your files off to somewhere to get it manufactured got really cheap in a lot of different ways over the last few years. And send, cut, send is the laser cut metal version of that. I mean, they do more than just metal, but laser cut metals are really like, that's very expensive to be able to do in your home or home workshop or your makerspace. And so this is a tool, like it says, where you can send them digital files of stuff you want made, and it will then select your material, whether it's stainless steel or aluminum, or I mean, they'll do lots of other stuff.
Yeah,
they'll cut it and they'll send it back to you.
Yeah, they'll even do the bending on it too. Recently, I noticed that if you want something cut, like water jet cut, and then you want the edges of it like bent on, I forget what those machines are called that actually do the
like a bending brake.
Yeah, metal brake. They'll do that stuff for you too. I don't want this to sound like an ad. We're not being supported by them, but they are one of those services that I really think started getting their momentum going this year. Something like this would be an interesting service to explore if you've got the wherewithal and the money to do it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to add the final note that it's surprisingly affordable too.
Yeah. Becky Stern's portable soldering station. I really like this project from Becky Stern, and I almost wanted to include it in projects, but it's really more like a tool. There are so many of these similar bent metal soldering stands that you can almost take it as a standard and start adapting like these 3D printed fittings into it. And that's exactly what Becky did. It's almost like a tool roll that comes out of your soldering station that includes all the little bits and, you know, the solder and stuff you'd want to pack into a portable soldering station on the go. I thought it was really well thought out.
Yeah, between Adam Savage and Becky Stern, I've been trying to stockpile these ideas for like portable soldering station tools, because I have a good soldering setup at my electronics workbench behind me, but in my basement workshop, I don't have a good soldering setup. And, you know, trying to collect ideas so that when I make the jump into like a wireless soldering setup, I can pull the trigger and have a good portable thing, you know, because when I have the odd soldering job, whether I'm working in my laser cutter or my CNC or something like that, I have something I can easily move around and get those wires together.
Yeah. The Raspberry Pi Pico W I thought to include on this. I know that what everyone really wants is the Raspberry Pi computers to come back in stock and to, you know, take a step forward. But we did get a Pico W this year, which is of course, like the internet connector, the Wi-Fi compatible version of their Pico board. They're very affordable Pico board. I don't know what the W is priced at. I want to say probably around $20 or under 20.
I think it's 10.
So that was a big board this year. Although I will say I still am looking at all the projects of the past year. I saw more ESP32 type projects than anything that was really making use of the Pico W so much in my mind. And maybe I'm missing some things, but I'm excited that the Pico board is now the Pico W is now part of the ecosystem. But the ESP32, which I didn't include on this list, really found its way into a lot of projects.
Yeah, I imagine that's just because the ESP32 has just been with us for a lot longer. Mm-hmm. And so it's collected a lot more momentum of people developing projects from it and people borrowing code and things, you know, things like the good things that come out of a big ecosystem. But right. And actually we are both wrong. The Pico W is $6.
All right, the Jen Schachter, her laser cut, hand painted, vintage sign making breakthrough. I thought that was a really cool project and technique that I'd never seen done before. And she just came up with it and added it to our vocabulary of how to come up with hand painted sign. I think you even played around with it, right?
I love this. I don't know how well we can see this here. This is like my own personal logo that I made using this technique. I did a couple of other tests with this, and I also started playing around with in my workbench behind me here. I have all these drawers full of stuff, and I realized I should finally get around to organizing what goes in each drawer so I can find it later, and use the same technique to make the labels for the drawers. And it's such a cool little technique of where, and yes, in Jen's version, you use a laser. Basically, you just use the laser to quickly score the backing paper that comes on acrylic. And you use that to peel away the mask that then you can paint in and get your design right. I suspect you could probably do this same technique using vinyl. Like if you have access to a vinyl cutter, mm-hmm. Make all the cuts in your vinyl that you'll need, transfer the whole thing without weeding it onto your acrylic, and then peel away the parts you need as a mask, and then keep going back over with your paint colors. Yeah. I suspect, and I need to try it before I fully endorse that, you don't even need access to a laser cutter to try this technique. And you could just create really cool, really accurate, gorgeous looking signs. And it's just so much fun to play around with. Yeah.
A similar tip here. Federico from Wolfcat Workshop showed how he was able to use erasable pens in his watercolor designs, and erasable pens in a plotter. I think that's what it was. It was plotter designs with an erasable pen. So he could go back, he could plot out the design, go through and watercolor it, fill it in, and then erase the lines after the fact to create these beautiful works that just it would boggle the mind to think that he didn't have some kind of element to work the watercolors into. But when you're erasing the lines later, they look beautiful. I just thought that was such an easy and useful tip for people who want to create really unique, one-of-a-kind watercolor art and have access to a plotter and can make use of that technique. So.
And then we have Noods from Adafruit.
We've always had the Noods, but we've got the Adafruit Noods. Adafruit, I think it was this year where they really unveiled their line of super thin, flexible LED filament. And this is like a byproduct of the LED filaments that were going inside of the commercial, like Edison bulb type transition to more the Edison bulb type electrical light bulbs, but long lengths of them, and all kinds of different colors, and they look like the super thin neon tubes. And then we've been seeing them make their way into all kinds of projects this past year.
Yeah, I mean they're like a miniaturized version of the LED neon silicone strands that you can get.
Right.
But these are I think they're 300 millimeters long, that's about a foot in length. And I think you can get them in a couple different lengths.
Yeah.
And they're just ridiculously flexible. I think you got to see them in person at Silicon in Sophie Wong's work.
Yeah. I think she was using them in a few different projects because they do lend themselves to wearables because they're so flexible. They also probably would work well in miniatures if you're doing miniature neon signs and things like that. You do have to kind of think where could I use these? But just to know that that's another little thing that you can draw from to get a small colored LED light source into either a wearable or a miniature project or something else. They're really neat. And now Adafruit's stocking a whole line of different lengths and colors, and it's a cool little extra feature of 2022, a new thing that you can buy and use.
Yeah. And next up you have the Alpakka open source gamepad. That
was one I just featured in maker update from a few weeks ago, and it totally caught me off guard. It's this really well developed Xbox style gamepad system with both the electronics, which I think are based on the Raspberry Pi Pico board, and even features like accelerometer and things that you'd want to have in a modern day gamepad, all built out of this open source system. You can see the 3D print files, the code, the bill of materials, everything's there. And it just seems insanely well done for a project like this.
Yeah, I was really impressed by it, and I think I might be tempted to build this thing sometime coming up. I mean, I think it's. I wonder if it's going to be limited in its function as a game controller because it only has one analog stick. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was really excited to see this. Of course, because everything is configurable and remappable, it means that there's a lot of accessibility stuff built directly into it. But yeah, I think I'm too curious about this one to not want to have to try it myself.
Nozzles, 3D printer nozzles. That's another one where that was interesting to see this year. People start moving into a different kind of standard around those.
Well, and a big part of this is because, unfortunately, I'm a little bit myopic with this because really Cura is the only slicer that I use on the regular, but Cura added a feature where it would be able to vary the width of the filament that was extruded by changing the extrusion rate and also speeding up the nozzle. So what that means is that you can take in this case, taking a 0.6 millimeter nozzle, and you could get detail that you would otherwise only normally be able to get from a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the benefits of larger nozzles is that you not only get thicker lines that result in a stronger print, but also your print prints faster. And you can do this without losing the detail that you would normally need a smaller nozzle to get. And so far it's working. Since seeing this video, I unthreaded my 0.4 millimeter nozzle, put in the 0.6, and I've just been living that life since then. And I haven't had any issues. Especially for people like me who are on an older printer, and which still prints pretty slowly. It's definitely brought my print speeds back up again. And, just excited to see where slicing technologies like that are gonna keep going forward.
Yeah, and you'd probably need it for the Voidstar Labs Gridfinity, right? Because there's a lot of 3D printed elements there too, right?
Yeah. So this
Talk to me about Gridfinity.
This is another thing from Zack Freedman. This is a sort of a ecosystem of like workbench storage systems, or just storage systems in general. So it starts with a base grid, and then various modules that you can plug into it. And by plug into it, I mean like literally just drop it into this grid. The grid keeps them so they don't bump around, and you can arrange them in different heights and arrangements, almost like Lego. And so this is an organization system for like small parts like screws or electronic components. People have built tool holders, and that's the other really fun thing about this, is that Zack then took his original designs that he came up with like 10 or 12 different storage modules for them, and then just said, here's the parameters, go build stuff. And the internet just went crazy with it. It's just this really cool, wonderful ecosystem that just blew up into, if you are looking for a good organization system for your workbench or your desk or for anything, just look up Gridfinity, and I think you'll probably find all the tools you need that you can 3D print and get yourself organized.
All right. And then one last great tip here, the WLED project.
Yeah. So this, I found out this through a project that we featured earlier this year. That was one of the like nano leaf projects. These projects of arrangements of LEDs that you could then connect together and make like cool wall art. And this is just a piece of software that runs on a variety of different wireless microcontrollers. One of the biggest featured ones, once again, is that ESP32. And you just upload a little bit of software to it, connect it to your NeoPixel or WLED, addressable LED strip. And then you connect to it, you tell it what pin the LED strip is on, and then you can just control it through an app or a web interface to say, here's the, and then just create there's a bunch of pre-programmed lighting patterns built into it. You can create your own, you can create your own colors and presets. So if you just want to be able to quickly spin up a cool RGB LED strip display or lighting scheme for, I don't know, whatever you want to create that for, whether it's some offset lighting in your home or office or whatever. This is a really quick tool that cuts out a lot of the working with the various code or just uploading the Adafruit NeoPixel sample code, and it makes it really fun to play around with.
All right, I think that does it for the show, Tyler. Thank you for all the great recommendations. Thank you for joining me in another year of Making Maker Update. I'm excited to get the show off to another start here for 2023. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks to DigiKey Electronics. Happy New Year, and we'll see you soon.